arriving any moment. So we'd like to invite all of you to kindly take your seats, kind of round off those conversations. In just a while, our guest of honor, he is Acting Minister for Transport, Mr. Chee Hong Tat, will be walking in from that door. So we will all put our hands together and warmly welcome him. You can remain seated if you like here. Just put your hands together to welcome him, and then we can start the event proper. A couple of things, just to check that your mobile phones and all beeping devices are switched to silent mode. That's one. You have a QR code on your name tag. I think that allows you to join us for the Pigeonhole Q&A session and to put in your questions as the panel starts running. Apart from that, aircon, is it good right now? The air conditioning? All good, perfect. It's the optimum temperature of 25 degrees. So we just want to highlight that we're all in this together. Sustainability, the small things that we do to make a big difference. So thank you for joining us in that effort. So in the meantime, I'm also waiting for the queue for the guest of honor to arrive. So appreciate your patience. And we'll start shortly once we get the okay. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands to warmly welcome our guest of honor, making his way in, Acting Minister for Transport, Mr. Chee Hong Tat. Welcome, good to have you, sir. Very good afternoon to our guest of honor, Minister Chee Hong Tat. all our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the International Safety at Sea Conference 2023. So good to see many familiar faces. Welcome back to join us. And of course, it's good to be back here as well as your MC for this afternoon, this 2 days actually, moving forward. Now that said, as we begin our session this afternoon, I think I'm being reminded as I saw the booths outside that safety shouldn't be taken for granted. So we want to actually start off this event with a safety protocol. We have a short fire safety video that I'd like to have you direct your attention, and we'll learn about the evacuation procedures that will happen in the event of an emergency. So let's all take a look first.
Welcome to Park Royal on Beach Road. Please give us your full attention as we show you what to expect when the fire alarm is activated. Fire safety evacuation video. The fire alarm has been activated. We are investigating the situation. Please remain calm and wait for further instruction. Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. There exists an emergency situation in the building. Please evacuate by the nearest exit and obey all instructions given by the fire wardens. Remember to avoid the use of lifts. All guests from Grand Ballroom 2 and 3 please exit through the designated fire exit door near to the link bridge. Please evacuate in an orderly manner. Take only your valuables and leave all bulky items behind. All guests from Grand Ballroom 1, Sky Ballroom 1, 2, 3 and Boardroom please exit through the designated fire exit doors 9, 10 or 11 leading to the courtyard. Please remain calm and head towards the fire assembly point. Please be careful as you make your way down the stairs. All staff, guests, customers, visitors shall not re-enter the building once at the assembly point unless instructed otherwise by the civil defense officer in attendance. On reaching the assembly area, please take your attendance with the staff present. If you are feeling unwell or need any medical attention, please inform the staff present. Thank you for your kind attention and have a nice day.
Thank you very much for your kind attention. That rounds off the fire safety. And I know that safety is a very important topic actually for many of you, and that's why you're here this afternoon. That said, the conference today is the first of a whole series of events. It's a very happening week for all of us here, for MPA and for you as well. Monday all through to Friday here at the International Safety at Sea Week. It is an annual initiative by the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore to promote and to really get us up to speed on safety at sea. So this year, we're very, very happy that we're welcoming more than 350 participants from over 20 different countries. I had the pleasure of saying hi to many of you, and I know some of you really came the distance to be here with us this afternoon. We're sitting in a room of people with lots of good experience and things to share with us, key decision makers from governments all over the world, as well as representatives from across the various sectors of the maritime industry. So I just want to take this moment to pause and to say a big thank you to all of you who flew in specially for this. Can we give them a warm round of applause? And really gratitude for being here this afternoon. Yeah. It's so different to be in the same room and to be able to exchange perspectives and to discuss and learn together. So that said, we really appreciate every single one of you here. To begin today's conference, I'm very pleased to be opening the stage up to our guest of honor, Acting Minister for Transport, Mr. Chee Hong Tat, for his opening address. Minister, please.
Mr. Ishaq Ismail, Chairman, National Maritime Safety at Sea Council, Professor Kenneth Loh, Chairman, Marine Industries Committee, Workplace Safety and Health Council. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us as we mark the 10th year of the Safety at Sea Singapore campaign. We started the campaign in 2014 as an industry-wide effort to increase safety awareness and to inculcate a safety-first culture at sea. This is increasingly critical as we scale up our port operations and move towards bunkering of alternative fuels for shipping. Collaboration with industry and unions is critical to achieve safety at sea. The National Maritime Safety at Sea Council, as well as the 4 MPA industry safety work groups focusing on safety of navigation, harborcraft, pleasurecraft, and regional ferry communities, have spearheaded various initiatives to instill a strong safety culture, sharpen safety policies, and improve information sharing. Our tripartite efforts have achieved good progress. The total number of safety incidents in our waters per 100,000 vessel movements has dropped from more than half over the past 5 years, from 17.8 in 2018 to 8.7 last year. So while this represents a good improvement, we must continue to enhance our systems and processes to be ready for the incidents that do occur in our waters. Some of you may have read the recent news that a kayaker went missing off the coast of Sentosa yesterday. MPA is working closely with other agencies on an ongoing search and rescue operation. We hope the kayaker is all right and will be found soon. Some members of our maritime community in Singapore have reached out to MPA previously to offer their help in supporting search and rescue efforts in our waters. I want to thank the members of our maritime community for their suggestion and to support this ground-up initiative. MPA will be working with the National Maritime Safety at Sea Council to develop a new volunteer program for operators of recreational watercraft and pleasurecraft. Volunteers will receive training to act as MPA's additional eyes and ears if they are in the vicinity of a search and rescue operation within our port waters. With members of our maritime community complementing the efforts of our government agencies, I believe we can further enhance the safety of our seas for everyone. MPA will announce more details early next year after it has finalized the implementation plans. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme for this year's International Safety at Sea Conference is Advancing Maritime Safety in a Green and Digital Age. The green and digital transition will transform the operations of the maritime sector, presenting new opportunities and challenges for safety at sea. In some cases, innovations can enable improvements in both efficiency and safety at the same time. One example is digital bunkering. On 1st November 2023, MPA will launch the Digital Bunkering Initiative, which makes available mobile and cloud applications to digitalize documentation, such as electronic bunker delivery notes, or EBDNs. EBDNs will reduce the occurrence of errors and also fraud, and save time and money for businesses. They will also improve safety for our cargo officers by removing the need for them to cross between vessels to complete and exchange documentation. I will encourage our industry players to make good use of EBDNs. MPA will work with Enterprise Singapore and Workforce Singapore to help interested companies to adopt digital bunkering solutions by providing training subsidies as well as support for our workers. Help is available, but businesses also need to take the initiative to embark on the journey. Now, there is also an ongoing initiative for some of the companies in our sector, and I'm referring to those that have signed company training committees agreement with NTUC. because NTUC also has an additional fund that they can use to support our companies that have signed such an agreement with the unions. So it's called the CTC Fund, Company Training Committee Fund. Okay, so NTUC has been given a pool of money by the Ministry of Finance to administer this fund, and they can provide some additional support to our companies that have signed the CTCs with NTUC on top of what the government is able to provide. Okay, so I will encourage our industry players first to come on board this EBDN initiative, Digital Bunkering Initiative, for the benefits that I have explained. If you need help, help is available, both from the government agencies and also for some of you, work with NTUC, and help can also be available for our workers, for our companies from NTUC. Another example of innovations that improve both efficiency and safety is Maritime 5G, which will be a key enabler for new technology such as maritime autonomous surface ships and drones to operate in our port waters. I'm glad to announce that MPA, the IMDA, and one of our telcos called M1 have recently completed phase 1 of the Maritime 5G plans, providing coverage in the waters around our southernmost islands. So this Maritime 5G will cover fully our port waters when it's completed. And with Maritime 5G, we can improve accessibility to healthcare for seafarers in our port. For example, M1 and Fullerton Health will use Maritime 5G to improve the audio and visual quality for telemedicine consultations and to provide drone delivery of medication to our seafarers. This reduces the need for seafarers to be transferred to shore for medical assistance. Of course, if it's a serious condition, serious illness, they will still have to be transported to shore. But for other illnesses that can be dealt with through telemedicine, this saves time and is also safer for everyone. In other cases, pushing the frontier will introduce new challenges and potential safety risks. But this does not mean that we should stay put and not press ahead. Rather, we must take steps to mitigate and minimize possible downsides so that new processes and technologies can be implemented safely and effectively. So first, we must design our new systems and equipment with safety as a priority. This has been MPA's approach in the adoption of electric hovercraft in our waters. In July this year, MPA issued an expression of interest which called for proposals from the industry to design and develop safe and efficient electric hovercraft. MPA has received 55 proposals from over 70 local and international companies and consortiums. MPA will update the industry on its evaluation of the proposals by the end of the year. Second, we must work with our key stakeholders to develop safety processes and standards to govern the use of new technologies and fuels. For example, MPA facilitated the conduct of the first ship-to-container ship methanol bunkering operation in our port waters in July this year. 28 government, research, and industry partners worked together for a year to develop rigorous safety procedures through operational and risk assessments, computational modeling, and validation at sea. It is really a team effort by the entire Maritime Singapore community. With the experience from the July exercise on methanol bunkering, Maritime Singapore stakeholders have gained greater confidence in handling methanol safely. As the next step, MPA will launch a request for information for methanol bunkering supply in the coming months to gauge the industry's interest in supplying methanol in Singapore. This will eventually lead to a future request for proposal for methanol bunkering licenses. Third, we must exercise our capabilities in responding to new contingencies that may arise, learning from experience in controlled settings so that we can have the confidence in our operational readiness. Of course, I acknowledge that the exercises cannot cover everything. It will not be 100% comprehensive. But I think if we design it well and we work closely together with our tripartite partners, it is a good opportunity to run through our processes. And it's also a good opportunity to look at the communications amongst the different partners and stakeholders. It's like you train for a marathon. You need to start in a gym, shorter distances, train up your stamina, train up your muscles. And then these are all the different components that eventually come together and allow us to finish the marathon. So likewise, we shouldn't wait for something to happen and then we scramble last minute because we're all unprepared. It's better for us to start now when things are peaceful, things are fine, and then we gear up and prepare ourselves. So, as an example, Singapore is preparing to deal with potential safety incidents involving battery-powered vessels, given that the number of electric hovercraft plying on waters will increase in the coming years. So batteries on electric vessels can generate heat that is twice as intense as conventional fires. And an uncontrolled increase in temperature within the battery could result in an explosion. Batteries can also produce toxic and flammable gas which need to be vented off in an emergency. Okay, so it's not risk-free switching from conventional to batteries, but of course there are also a lot of benefits. First and foremost, of course, is the carbon emissions and the pollution. But what it means is we need to be aware of the risks, and we need to then prepare ourselves to mitigate those risks. And not just MPA, actually the whole industry, all of us. Hence, this year's ferry rescue exercise during Safety at Sea Week will be conducted with an electric ferry for the first time, providing an opportunity for agencies to gain experience in responding to new scenarios that may arise with battery-powered vessels. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude my speech. Maritime Singapore has come a long way in enhancing maritime safety over the 10 years since MPA launched the Safety at Sea campaign. As the world's busiest transshipment hub port that is poised for future growth, safety is vital for our continued success. When ships come to Singapore, we want to make sure that they come safely and they leave safely. We also want to make sure that our workers, both our seafarers and also our port workers, can have the confidence that when they work in our maritime sector, that they will be kept safe, so that they are able to return home safely to their loved ones. So we must persevere in our collective efforts to further improve our safety standards, even as our operating environment grows increasingly complex. And as I shared with our tripartite partners previously, this is no different from how we as an industry must come together to tackle challenges that we all collectively share. During COVID, that was what we did. We overcame the challenges brought about by the pandemic. When we were looking for innovations, that was what we did. We came together, we discussed, we discovered new ways of working together, new ways of applying technologies. The same applies to safety. It is better for us to come together and leverage on our respective strengths and resources and put safety at the heart of everything we do. I have every confidence that our maritime community will be able to rise up to this challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for that opening address. We'd like to keep you on stage. Minister, I'd like to invite you to join me here on stage, here in the center for the next segment. Appreciate your patience as I invite a few more distinguished guests to join us on stage for this symbolic launch. First, I'd like to call upon Mr. Teo Eng Dee, Chief Executive of MPA, to join us. Mr. Ishak Ismail, the Chairman of National Maritime Safety at Sea Council, please join us. Professor Kenneth Loh, Chairman of WSH Council Marine Industries Committee, and Ms. Mary Liu, General Secretary, Singapore Maritime Officers Union. Welcome. Good to have all of you here again. All right, so we're set. This is a significant or rather symbolic moment to launch us off for a week of eventful learning together. So to all our guests on stage, what we do is we do a countdown first, not too excited. We just do a countdown, and then you'll put your palms on the screen to launch, and we'll take a picture. So make sure you're looking at the cameraman at all times. Hold on, your palm will come through. Yeah, which hand would you like to use? Whichever hand that makes you, yeah. Oh, both hands are, wow, so excited. Okay, later, we'll do that. Okay, so we're going to do a countdown together with all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me, starting from the countdown of 3. Okay, let's go with starting now. 3, 2, 1. Place your palms. Big smiles for the camera, please. Big smiles. That's right, the hero shot. Thank you. Let's step to the side to have a look at the video. Advancing Maritime Safety in a Green and Digital Age. Ladies and gentlemen, International Safety at Sea Conference 2023 is launched. Thank you for being with us. We want to take a group shot together. We'd like to invite you to the center. Let's move close together. Just to commemorate this moment, an annual gathering. Thank you. We got the shot. We'd like to invite you down this way. Our ushers will take you down back to your seats. It's a pleasure to have you all. I'd like to invite you down to enjoy the rest of the program this afternoon. Now, as you know, this afternoon we will be talking about pertinent issues. As I think Minister has covered as well, we're talking about maritime safety, decarbonization, digitalization, and those will be the spotlight discussions for this year. But how does it look like? And how does that apply to your own organizations? I think that's where the fun part comes in exchanging perspectives. It's going to be a very eventful week up ahead from now till all the way Friday. This afternoon alone, we'll be having our 4 sessions in the conference itself. And some of you might have signed up for the safety forums, for the pleasure craft, as well as harbour craft sectors. Yes, and we will have a ferry rescue exercise program as well. Hopefully you've got a slot in there. 2 industry visits, as well as the Singapore Registry of Ships Forum. Wow, I need to catch my breath. You know, so we're really making use of this week to get together, to network, to learn, to elevate the work that we're doing, and of course, more importantly, safety in all that we do. Later on this afternoon, if you'd like to join us at about 4 p.m., we'll be having the award session. We are actually 2 award recipients. They have showed a significant part in ensuring safety and, of course, rescue out at sea. So we want to acknowledge their efforts. That's it. The stage behind me is almost ready. And we'll be hearing from 2 distinguished panels that will be joining us here on stage. They consist of your maritime authorities as well as international industry organizations on stage. And ladies and gentlemen, you'll not just be sitting and watching the conversation. We'd love for you to participate. How do you do that? Please scan the QR code. That's right, on the screen. Pigeonhole, I'm sure many of you are familiar, you've gone for conferences, but as the conversation develops, it will depend largely on what you ask in this room. The questions that you bring to the table and the stage, and our moderators, our skilled moderators, will bring them up to our panelists for discussion. You can also scan it on your name badges if the QR code is not available later in the show. Okay, so that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Ready to jump in? We're going to start with our very first panel session. Now, this one will be talking about advancing maritime safety in a green age. For this, moderating the segment is Mr. Ishak Ismail. Welcome back up. Hello. He's the chairman of National Maritime Safety at Sea Council Singapore. He has a panelist with him, Mr. Ismail Cobos Delgado. Welcome. He's deputy director of Maritime Safety Division, International Maritime Organization. Next, I'd like to call upon Mr. David Fu. Please join us, assistant chief executive Executive Operations Technology, MPA. Mr. Michael Drake, Executive Director of Operations, Australian Maritime Safety Authority. Good to have you. Mr. Pele Christensen, Senior Advisor, Technical Regulation, Climate and Green Transition, Danish Maritime Authority. Good to have you, sir. And finally, Commander Peter Bizzaro from the U.S. Coast Guard. Welcome here on stage with us. Thank you, thank you. So our panelists, just give them a moment to settle in, to feel the energy of the room, and of course, to bring in their wisdom as well. When we're ready, I'm now going to hand the time over to you, Mr. Ishak Ismail, to take us through this conversation. Over to you.
I'm not, she's on. Yes, it's on. Hello, and really thank you everyone for being here. This is our 10th year, and I like what Minister said at the end, and that is we're here with one focus: safety is vital. I like this focus of conversation. We continue the conversation, but I like to say additionally, as you heard a couple of things Minister has announced, there are many things in action. So I think let's do this, being the first session, being the chairman, I can do this. Let's make this a call for action. I think we're going to spend the 2 afternoons, 2 days, and many more, a couple more forums. I think I would say let's do a call to action. And we have members on the first panel that each in their own area have had many things they're doing as a call to action. And what they'll do shortly is say a little bit more. Each one of them will have a bit of time to say a little bit of, quite a bit actually, but we'll limit them. They've got a lot, so we'll limit them a little bit. And then we'll move on. We'll take a couple of questions from you guys, and we move on with conversation, and we'll see how it goes with call for action. We've got water here. So I told them earlier, I said, it's kind of like in the living room having coffee and having conversation and call to action. So now, before we start and before I take on each one of you, I thought we hand over to you, because one of the things you guys did was a pre-event poll, and we did one pre-event poll. And let's show that so that we set the stage for the first thinking that you guys have as members of the International Safety at Sea Conference. Let me ask the organizer. This is the first pre-event. This is something we'll do a bit later. Are we okay for the pre-event poll? And what it says in the pre-event poll is we asked you, let me see whether it comes up. I'm going to read out. Yeah, that's the one. So it asks a question to all of you. In your view, which is the most challenging component of the green transition of shipping? And you see that very clearly. 50%, it's about alternative fuels and technology. Engineering, it's 50%. And 30% is crew training and qualification. And yes, although we have the regulatory authorities, you may be 20%, but I'm sorry, you guys are taking on the other 50 or 32. It's 100% from the people on stage. So with that, let me just ask for the first panel member, say a short kind of 3 to 5 minutes. Mr. Ismail Kobos from IMO.
Thank you very much. And well, it's a great pleasure to participate in this panel of the International Safety at Sea Week. So, well, a number of sometimes radical new trends, developments, and challenges are already affecting the work of IMO. New technologies such as big data, artificial intelligence, and robotics, as well as availability of new energy sources, are taking shipping into a new era. And at the same time, we have the strong need to balance the benefits of these new technologies and alternative fuels with safety and security concerns, and the impact that this will have on environment and people. Well, it's well recognized that climate change is the single biggest challenge we are all facing. And we cannot underestimate the impact that this climate change and the actions that they will have on technological developments in shipping. So following the adoption of the initial strategy for greenhouse gases in 2018, IMO has recently adopted its 2023 greenhouse gas strategy with a clear goal to reach zero greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping by or around, and this means close to 2050, and taking into account different national circumstances. This strategy will be supported by a set of operational and technical measures, as well as midterm measures that will have a component that is technical and another component that will be economic. And they will be basically market-based measures, and they are yet to be developed by IMO. Well, to ensure the implementation of this strategy, the Maritime Safety Committee will conduct an assessment of the instruments under its purview, just to identify any safety issues that may arise as a result of the implementation of this strategy. In this connection, IMO has already intensified its work and its effort on the development of safety provisions related to alternative fuels and new technologies. And we, for example, have already in place interim guidelines for the safety of ships using methyl ethyl alcohol as fuel. We also have provisions for fuel cell power installations, LPG, and we are now working on the ammonia and hydrogen provisions. And we expect them to be finalized in 2024 or 2025. Well, as a consequence of these anticipated changes, we have to ensure the safety and health of the maritime workforce. And we in IMO are proactive in this regard. So we are working on different areas, and I would like to highlight the STCW comprehensive review, which will include a careful assessment of the competences that will be required by seafarers in the future. And we are also participating in a technical cooperation activity together with the Maritime Just Transition Task Force, which is an initiative of the UN Global Compact, which was launched at the COP26. And the main purpose of this activity will be to develop training framework for seafarers in the future. So the World Maritime Day theme for 2024 is Navigating the Future, Safety First. So it shows the central role that maritime safety plays in IMO in an era of new technologies and alternative fuels. In the field of digitalization, e-navigation, and maritime communications, we would say, or we can say that digitalization is not a new notion in IMO. There are already many systems on board that use digital technologies. In the field of e-navigation, for example, IMO is currently working on the harmonization of format and structure of maritime services, and this is to enhance the exchange of information in digital format. In the field of maritime communications, we also have significant developments. We are, for example, working in the introduction of a digital navigational data system. This is NAVDAT, and this will be introduced in the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System, GMDSS. This is supposed to enhance the broadcast of maritime safety information and search and rescue related information from shore to ships. This system should replace NAVTEX in the future. IMO has already initiated the work on the introduction of VDES into the maritime domain. This is a radio communication system for the digital exchange of information and data via VHF. We are also exploring the use of VHF digital voice communication in the maritime domain. The digitalization of the VHF maritime frequencies would allow to have more communication channels within the same amount of radio spectrum. And this is also expected to improve the voice quality and the communication of additional data during a call. In the field of maritime autonomous surface ships, following the completion in 2021 of the scoping exercise that we conducted to see to what extent IMO instruments could accommodate the use and operation of MAS, we are now working on the development of a non-mandatory instrument, which is expected to take effect in 2025. This has to form the basis for the future mandatory code on MAS, which should enter into force 1st of January of 2028. Well, in addition, we are also addressing the issues related to cybersecurity due to the emerging threats and vulnerabilities related to digitalization. And we have recommended that these risks could be addressed by means of the safety and security management practices and schemes that we have in place. And these are the ISM and the ISPS codes. So there is much more going on in IMO in relation to all these new technologies and digitalization processes, but I can assure you that IMO is working hard to ensure that shipping can embrace the digital revolution. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a quick one from IMO, and we'll go on to the second member of the panel. That's Mr. David Fu. He's from the Maritime Port Authority of Singapore. David.
Thank you, Ishak. Very good afternoon, all of you. Glad to be here. I normally don't talk about green because I'm in charge of technology, but everyone has to learn about green. So I want to talk in about 3 parts. First, to give a sort of a sit-rep, right, a situation update in terms of where we are now in our green journey. 2, it's about looking at what are Singapore's initiatives that we have done so far. And 3rd, really, it's about the panel discussion topic, how do we advance maritime safety in the green age? Earlier this month, I think on 4th October, the UN Facilitation Convention on Climate Change essentially had put out a synthetic report. Essentially, they were working on the 6th report by the International Panel for Climate Change. And the picture is not very good. In essence, if we want to take advantage and look at the window of opportunity to do mitigation actions in order to keep within the Paris Agreement of 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial sort of emissions level, we've got only a very small window of opportunity of about 5 to 7 years. And that's because all the nationally defined sort of commitments have not quite tracked the actions needed for us to reach that particular target. So I think, in essence, COP28, which will happen at the later part of November up to middle of December, will have an important mission, which is really to relook and to agree for different governments to come together to look at what are the climate change targets and the actions that we need to commit in order to make sure that we hit our targets. Else, I think the impact to the climate is very clear, and for us, it's not a very good picture for the future. The International Energy Agency, also in support of the IPCC AR6 report, had estimated that just in 2022, our carbon emissions were at a level of 36.8 gigatons. All right? That's about a 0.9% increase over the previous years. And for shipping, we account for about 2% of that, which means that if shipping were a country, we would clearly be in the top 10 of emitting countries. And for us, it is important now to really do our part because we do account for a significant sector of the carbon emissions. And this is a journey which we need to take. I congratulate the IMO in the 80th session of the Marine Protection and Environment Committee had actually agreed to enhance targets. So by 2050, we'll get to net zero, but we have, in a way, more ambitious targets by 2030 to hit at least 20% with a stretch goal of 30%, right, from 2008 GHG emissions level. And by 2040, to hit 70% with a stretch target of 80%. If we do not conform to these interim targets, it will be very hard to see a future pathway that will bring us to 2050. So I think all of us need to do our part. The second part of my remarks is about what we're doing in Singapore. So we are fortunate, we've been given the vice chairmanship of the MEPC. We have an important role because we will be chairing the steering com in terms of looking at the impact assessment. And this is a very important work because they are responsible for a report which will come up next year at MEPC 82. And by 2025, in MEPC 83, there's supposed to be a set of actions that we will have to commit to. So internationally, I think we're working with different stakeholders and partners to get this report done and to agree on the mitigating actions needed. And also internationally, for Singapore, we've been busy trying to establish different green and digital shipping corridors with like-minded partners. So we've started with Port of Rotterdam. We've expanded this with the Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach. And we are working, for example, with other countries such as Australia to come on board this very important initiative. The aim is really to look at the entire end-to-end route from Singapore to these various ports, to look at the infrastructure needed, the solutions, both digital and green solutions required to support these sort of corridors. And we hope to bring about more and more like-minded countries within this initiative. And it's important to demonstrate through pilot projects that these ambitions work. And therefore, to us, it's very important. Locally, we are also establishing certain initiatives. So under our Green Port program, we have started giving discounts, waivers of a certain percentage to ships that are coming in, calling to our port with low or zero carbon fuels, right? And also for local harborcraft, the good news is that, of course, we will waive port dues if you also use these low and net zero carbon fuels. And beyond that, we note that actually it's important to abate the local harborcraft sector. So earlier this year, we had put out an expression of interest to call for designs of electric harborcraft. This is important because the aggregation of these designs, looking at the best practices, will help us actually, the industry itself, to actually move towards the pathway of net zero. Because by 2050, all harborcraft in Singapore will be net zero. And by 2030, all new harborcraft will have to be using some of these net zero fuels, right? And or B100, or actually fully electric. So I think it's an important initiative. There are targets. And just last week, we also put out an expression of interest to make sure that we can bring in the financial industry in to help looking at different options and business use cases to help our industry. Last but not least, looking at the way that we should advance green. Earlier, Minister talked about the first methanol bunkering, which was done in Singapore back in July. This is indeed a very onerous sort of process because it's not just simply about a transfer of fuel, it's about the end-to-end requirements in terms of safety. And prior to that, we had already started work early last year, bringing together more than 28 different agencies in Singapore to actually go on to different workshops to look at hazard and HAZOP sort of issues, to actually do multiple tabletop exercises as well as ground deployment exercises to make sure that the first methanol bunkering sort of exercise was done safely. And indeed, together with the entire industry, with the seafarers, we had to look at issues such as training, working with the research institutes to look at modeling of the plume clouds. Why? Because methanol in itself, although it's a greener fuel, actually has problematic characteristics, right? Because it has a low flash point of 11 degrees, and it actually is very flammable in terms of volume by percentage of between 6 to 36%. Okay? So this means that methanol also is also a clear fire, so it's not like normal, you can see a yellow flame. Literally, people can actually walk into a methanol fire. So all these things need to be looked at in detail before we can actually do the bunkering properly, because we need to look at all the various extreme scenarios. And I know that I don't want to steal the thunder from session 3 tomorrow, or the future sessions, but there are many things which needs to be done in order for us to do this. So what more to say about other alternate fuels such as ammonia, which is also hazardous, right? At the very low parts per million of 220 already has hit the AEGL level of 2. So I think these are issues which are important. We need to look at it carefully in order to implement some of these green strategies in Singapore. So with that, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, David. And now, third, I'm going to ask him to, we maintain the time so we can have more conversation on the ground. I'm sorry, our two friends have taken, not say a lot more, but just there. We have Mr. Michael Drake from the Australian Maritime Safety Authority.
Thank you. I'm Australian, so I talk quickly, so hopefully I'll stick to time. Good afternoon all. It's a real pleasure to be here. And from the outset, can I say that Australia and AMSA, we're absolutely committed to advancing maritime safety in the green age. So it's really good to be here to talk to you about it. We're an island nation. like Singapore, we are heavily reliant on seaborne trade. 99% of the trade in and out of Australia by volume is from sea. So decarbonisation and safety in the maritime industry is crucial for us. We're working very heavily with a number of players, including the IMO, other nations such as yourselves here in Singapore, to do what we can on advancing maritime safety in the green age. One thing I'd like to show, though, is share what we're seeing today at the moment, because there's immense challenges across the industries. There's a lot of industry players here today, immense challenges in delivering technology in the current market, let alone how we're going to equip the industry, both as regulators, industry participants, for the future for greener technology. So a lot of you are aware we have a very strong port state control regime in Australia. We have quite a small fleet that trades internationally. We have about 31,000 domestic vessels, but we have a very strong port state control regime in Australia. What we're seeing with the current ships that are arriving in Australia is a slight decline in the quality of those vessels. The number of deficiencies we see on vessels at the moment for the past 2 years has been higher than it was 10 years ago. So we know the industry is still suffering a lot from, I guess, the flow-ons from the pandemic, be it the change in the just-in-time supply chains, the difficulty in getting spare parts, the difficulty in getting technical people out to see vessels, and crews are exhausted throughout this period. So we believe that's contributing to somewhat of a decline in vessels that we're seeing across the fleet at the moment. How that bears out is about how is planned maintenance being conducted at the moment. Is that leading to deficiencies? We're seeing a number of large deficiencies, more serious ones, for main engine failures, for power generation failures. It's got to the point where we're up to, I think, the 6th vessel that is about to be towed away as a dead ship from Australia to a repair yard because it's suffered a catastrophic failure. So I wanted to put that context there because we know that this is a climate of increased pressures on operators. We know there's crew shortages out there, but how can we as regulators and governments work with you as industry to adopt safer, cleaner and arguably more complex technology to advance maritime safety in a green age? We're very supportive of where green shipping is going, but at the same time it's likely that ships of 20 years are going to be somewhat different to the vessels we see today. And we need to support the human element, the crews on board, the shore side, and how do they adapt to deal with this new and emerging technology. And as we've talked about already a few times, every new technology comes with its own challenges, its own benefits and challenges. It's really pleasing to hear that tomorrow the ferry rescue exercise will be done on an electric vessel. That's a challenge that we're still grappling with at the moment, and we've seen some of the results of serious fires that have occurred on vessels resulting from not necessarily electric battery powered, but electric vehicles that have been carried on those vessels. So that is a challenge, but we need to make sure that we are equipping the people side of things to make sure that they've got all the training, the skills, the equipment necessary to adopt and operate that machinery moving forward. When we looked at the poll this afternoon, the crowd mentioned that the biggest challenge was the technological side of things. That is something that industry will lead in a lot of ways, supported through the IMO and ourselves as regulators. And often the regulator needs to catch up in some ways. But the people element and how we actually train the crew to operate them is something that we are really, really focused on. And I know I'm running out of time, but the other side is there's some things we can do to advance maritime safety on the shore side that'll make a big difference and actually also achieve a greenhouse gas reduction as well. And one thing I'd highlight is the operation of a vessel arrival system in a bulk port. The Port of Newcastle, one of the largest coal export ports in the world, a large bulker ran aground in 2010. They often had upwards of 50 vessels at anchor off that port. In response to that, they reorganised their landside operations and introduced a vessel arrival system. And basically all that system does is assign a bulk carrier a place in a queue while it's significantly further away from the port. But really importantly, that allows optimised passage planning, allows a vessel to slow down and, quite frankly, reduce its fuel intake. So once we've actually done the stats on that, we found that not only did that achieve a reduction in fuel burnt of upwards of 18%, It also improved landside efficiencies upwards of 50% in the port. So that was a relatively small change from the shipping side of things, very large change on the land side, but it was able to achieve a significant reduction in greenhouse gas. So whilst as an industry, it's really important that I think we think of the whole industry, both on the water, the training side of things, and also the land side, to how we can all come together to put measures in place to advance maritime safety. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And our fourth panel's short speech will be from Mr. Palle Christensen from the Danish Maritime Authority.
Yes, thank you. And I'm also very pleased to have the opportunity to join this panel to discuss this important topic on the safety in the green. Yeah, sorry. To discuss this important safety in the green and digital age. Decarbonization is a key priority for Denmark, and we are working on national, European, and international levels to reduce the DSG emission from shipping. As mentioned,
You're going to be closer.
Yeah, sorry. As mentioned by Ismail, in July this year, the Maritime Environmental and Protective Committee agreed on the 2023 greenhouse gas strategy with targets of climate neutrality by ships close to 2050, including checkpoint in 2030 and 2040. This 2023 strategy is an important step to ensuring that the shipping sector contributes to reaching the goals of the Paris Agreement and for providing the necessary private sector investment in green technologies, port infrastructure, and alternative fuels for shipping globally. And we need to ensure that the global regulation for ship is in place to support the transition in a safe way. Safety and green transition need to go hand in hand. The new technology and new fuels have different properties and need to be addressed in order to ensure the safety of the ship, the crew, and the environment. The toxicity of ammonia, the flammability of hydrogen, and the different fire properties of methanol. In my view, we have the experience and know-how to build safe vessels that can use alternative fuels such as ammonia and hydrogen. The largest safety challenges are related to the surroundings, the crew, the population in the surrounding, and the environment. For example, an emergency scenario where a release of ammonia or hydrogen, as well as also mentioned by the proper education and training of the crew. Denmark has, as a flag state, approved container vessels that can use methanol based on their interim guidelines on alternative design. It was the vessel that was bunkered out here. It's very important to gather as many of these early experience and feed them back to the IMO to ensure the right level of safety and safety for ship using the alternative fuels when developing the mandatory requirements in the IDF code and SOLAS. New fuel types and technologies challenge the existing regulatory frameworks and but this should not be a barrier for innovative ideas and solutions in the green transition. We, the regulators and the industry, need to work together to find a safe solution. To support first movers and paving the way for green fuels and new maritime technologies, the Danish Maritime Authority has launched what we call the Regulatory Future Lab. The Future Lab is a virtual matrix organization that offers an effective framework for ensuring test and flag state approval of new innovation solutions that can challenge the existing regulatory framework. As part of the Future Lab, we also gather knowledge on trends and identify needs for development of regulation that can support the green, safe, and digital transition of shipping. Ferries, fishing vessels, and small offshore supply vessels constitute a significant part of the coastal maritime activities in Denmark, and we are focused on accelerating the green transition of ferries and fishing vessels using either batteries or alternative fuels. We have already now several fairs using battery technologies, and we have projects on offshore supply vessels with autonomous those systems and also unmanned remote control drones, but that's smaller units. We do also participate in international partnerships to accelerate the green transition and support first movers. We have the Zero Emission Shipping Mission. That's an international public-private partnership under the Energy Ministerial Platform Mission Innovation, which is led by Denmark, Norway, and US, together with 2 private sector entities, the Global Maritime Forum and the Maersk McKinney Møller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping. Singapore is a valued core member of this mission innovation. In the zero emission shipping mission, the focus is on the entire value chain, the ship, the fuel production, and the fuel infrastructure to drive the sector to a tipping point in this transition. By introducing concrete projects, activities, shipping mission can document that it's possible to sail deep seas on zero emission fuels like ammonia, methanol, or hydrogen, or second generation biofuels by 2030. Knowledge and exchange on safety and contribute solution is one of the pillars in the shipping mission. We have also entered a memorandum of understanding as a start with UK and Belgium on increased cooperation to pave the use of new digital technologies and autonomous systems in shipping in the North Sea area. This agreement obliges the countries to involve and inform each other about ongoing activities, and this MOU is expected to be expanded to include other North Sea countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And a quick note from our member of the panel. Thank you so much. Last one is Commander Peter Bizarro from the United States Coast Guard.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Peter Bizarro, United States Coast Guard. I lead a Coast Guard unit based out of here in Singapore, and I'm proud to call this a home for the last year of my life so far. The maritime industry is undergoing an evolution across all domains. One of our major challenges in the United States is that we only have 300 or so internationally trading ships, while we have 18,000 and more domestically trading ships that are not subject to SOLAS and IMO regulations. So when I looked at this panel specifically, what are the kind of big themes that stuck out to me? The first one is changing technologies, but we have consistent principles. We have new fuels, emission regimes, ballast water treatment systems, cybersecurity that complicates everything, and they're all a part of this change. I remain optimistic in the face of these new technologies as our safety principles remain constant. We will all work together to protect lives, vessels, and our environment. Now, while technologies often grab a lot of our focus, they also come with complications. How effective is this new system? How much time does it take for the crew to integrate it into your daily regime? However, we can't lose focus on the existing challenges that we have on board. Metal's still going to rust. We still have to take the ship in the dry dock. We still have to make sure our crew can still navigate the vessel per our standard terms. And we must continue to pursue those who put profit in front of our environment. And so those are some things that we need to keep in mind as we move forward. When looking at the pre-board poll, I'm one of the 20% that thinks the regulatory part's the scariest, right? The industry's innovators are amazing. As a regulator, I prefer to have clear, defined standards. But the United States understands that that's not going to be the case for a little while. We look to work with the international community, our class society partners, our other flag states, to develop international standards, while also we've better defined our design basis approval process that lets commercial operators propose a regulatory regime for a new project as we work to eliminate those uncertainties through the life cycle of a new project standard. And then one of the biggest questions and concerns is always this workforce readiness component. How do we train people for a system that hasn't been developed yet? When a system is put into place, as we learn things as we go through it, how do we integrate those changes? What are those iterations, that training as we put in that life cycle? How do we keep people getting smarter as we move forward, not only as a regulatory aspect, but as a crew manager and ship operator? All right. that's my portion.
Thank you. Now, I'm watching time, but thank you so much from the panelists, and thank you so much. I will watch time, and I would like to say what I hear, right? Balancing competing things we need to do between the two perspectives. But what I hear is its mission is still our target, and I like the point that it's still about trade. We need to make it safe because it's still about trade. And of course, the other part is in terms of targets, IMO 2050, and each one of you are looking at what you want to do. I've also heard about the workforce, and they need to come up to speed because it is something new, it's a different world, and these are the things we're hearing. I would like, as I'm looking at the questions coming up, but I have a question in my mind as we hear the authorities kind of stating their role, I would like to hear from you guys, because there are industry partners here and there are people out there taking on action. What would you say if this is the role we've said, and you stated in a couple of minutes, what are your expectations for the industry in advancing maritime safety in the green age? So your expectations of the industry, or the players out there other than you guys. So kind of saying it from your expectations. How do we go about this? I suppose IMO's expectations. What are your expectations for them to advance maritime safety in the green age?
Well, thank you very much. Well, we in IMO now have very ambitious goals, but I think the contribution from the industry is going to be fundamental, is going to be key. We have defined the goals. We need to define now the path and the tools to reach these goals, and the industry will play a fundamental role. And I think that regulations can not be developed without the contribution that the industry will make. And in fact, this experience that the industry will gain in trying to develop new technologies, new fuels, will lay the groundwork for the future regulations in IMO. But I think this contribution is going to be the basis for the future regulations and the basis to achieve these ambitious goals, which are not easy, by the way.
Okay, so expectations are there, and they also understand it's not easy. So let's hear any more expectations of the industry and the players out there. Michael, you pick up the mic, and I thought you want to get out there, and then I'll call on anybody else.
It's about communication is the way I see it. We're regulators, well, I am, don't want to speak for everyone else. It's about making sure the trade keeps going. And there's a here and now problem, and then there's a future problem. So we've got to balance the needs of how we operate in the industry today and equipping the industry for the future. A lot of that comes down to open and honest communication between industry and regulators. It's no point having the safest regulation in the world if it stops the industry. So it's about how do we actually make sure that we can have a regime that is flexible enough to deliver industry outcomes, but maintain those base levels of safety and the environmental concerns. And a lot of that comes down to ongoing dialogue. In my mind, it's working with the likes of the IMO, it's influencing the regulators and how it's done at a global community. So I think the more open and honest we can be, and that consistent back and forth dialogue is a key to making this work for everyone.
Nice. So it's a different world out there. It needs communication. So open communication. And David, you alluded to something you said earlier, partnership, collaboration. You want to say more in your expectation? Where could that happen down the line for you guys?
Okay, so I see this as an ecosystem approach because we certainly are in together and we need to get every part of the entire ecosystem to work together. But what's more important is, I feel, is that we cannot wait for the perfect solution, right? Because the longer we wait, the window of opportunities will start closing. And it's important for us to decide soon in terms of the pathways we're going to take. And it's very clear to us, actually it's a multi-fuel pathway. And for us as regulators, it's important for us to prepare the inception facilities, the infrastructure needed to support that future. And we may, weave in and out of different technologies along the way, but in the end, it's not about just waiting for that perfect solution. We need to start now to do certain pilots, make sure that because it's a total ecosystem, and it's not just point-to-point sort of relationships. So I think we need to get to work, especially with the human factors. Because I think for us, it takes time to train And the crews need to have certainty too, because they're dealing with different kinds of situations, different sort of fuels, and the training requirements will be different for these different situations.
Right. Any others from the panel to add on to what would your expectations be? Which you're okay? You want to add on?
Yes, thank you. As I mentioned, we have the Future Lab. That's established because it's very important that the industry is having the possibility to come with new ideas, and then we can make an alternative approval of it, and then use the experience in the further work. We cannot wait for the regulators. We are working too slow, although we are very quick in IMO.
Right. Commander, any thoughts? I heard from the panel, and I haven't seen the question yet, there's also the need to review the processes, and you don't know what you don't know yet. It's going to be a new challenge, and they've also spoken about processes. So I think for the industry players, an expectation is if you don't know what is the answer in the future, you know what you need to do. So think about the communication and the processes that needs to be changed in order to reduce things and to make it better in the green age. Right now, so I have a poll question. I want to throw it back to you guys. Can we take poll number 1, the question about short term? In the short term, so we've heard targets. We know there's a 2050. But in the short term, and I think you mentioned 24, 25, that things are happening, you're starting to experiment. Would you be able to bring up that poll question on the short term? One of the questions. And I'd like you to do a voting on this as we take on, as the organizers bring up the poll question. Do they have it in Pigeonhole? Let me see it. All right, so let me see. Yup. What should regulators focus on? So now you come back to tell them what should they focus on in your mind in the short term to improve maritime safety in the green age. And I think we have a few possible answers that you could take on in terms of the poll. Let me see whether I have those. I think you're looking at it. Are you able to assess this Pigeonhole conversation? Let me see. You have development of technical regulations, one possible answer. Enhancing maritime cybersecurity as the other one. Data collection and research, or improvement to crew training and qualification. Let's see, the answer is coming in. So you guys know the question, the expectation back to you in the short term. What could we do? And here we're coming in at 38% is coming in. I'm seeing differently here. 40 data collection, 42.9 data collection and research. And these are the expectations. And then we've got development of technical regulations as 34. And then we have the movement to crew. So guys, back to you. That's the expectation in the short term. Cover any parts you want. Can you see it? And if not, you're going to turn around. So these are your expectations. Let's go at 42.9, development of technical regulations. Is that match what you're doing? And is there something new you're doing, or you want to tell them? We have IMO last, so anyone from the panel other than IMO?
Okay, I'll take the first shot on this question. As we can see, we have a variety of different opinions. I think we can do a lot of these things at the same time. We are very big organizations. We can proceed in multiple directions. Something like development of technical regulations is something the US and the IMO work with and all of our maritime partners. At the same time, there are other things we can do first, such as getting good at maritime cybersecurity. That currently exists as a concept, and it's going to continue to exist for a long period in the future. So that's something we can work on now, as well as updating our crew training, and then being able to have that be iterative as we move forward and new technologies come online, have it push in that direction. So I think it's part of working in every single direction at once. Fortunately, the Coast Guard's not responsible for doing all that by itself in the US.
Thank you. So David, as you say, there are no clear answers, but at least this one, if you can frame the technical regulations, what's your thoughts on that? That's expectation for authorities to do, development of technical expectation. David, over to you.
Well, I'm actually think that everything is actually important in the short term. Okay. I was just a bit surprised in terms of the percentage for maritime cybersecurity. I'll explain why. Actually, for us, eventually, when ships are carrying the alternative fuels, the last thing you want is to have a ship-to-ship collision, right? And as ships get more automated, when they're using more digital systems, the security of these systems will be very important. because you don't want to have cyber pirates, cyber hacks that actually can traverse from cyber to a physical sort of outcome, right? So I think it's just as important, although only 3.3% believe it's important. That's one area which we are also focusing on, which is quite critical. And for us, similar to what we are doing for the hovercraft industry, is that we feel that we need to be able to aggregate the cybersecurity levels in terms of the requirements and elevate the baseline levels for every company. We have about 5,000 maritime companies in Singapore. We're going to set up within the next 2 years a Maritime Cyber Assurance and Operations Center, trying to bring in the entire industry together with us so that everyone's cost is going to be lowered, but everyone's security is going to be enhanced. And this is, I think, an important area that we need to focus on, because ships also will get more and more automated. And of course, the future, we hope perhaps there's going to be fully autonomous ships too. And what happens if you don't deal with cybersecurity? So I think those were my comments on this.
Nice. So actually, it's embedded into the first one, cybersecurity and technical regulations from a very specific angle. So you add that together, it's quite a huge additional total. We're running out of time. So it just tells me that first, I don't want to ambush Yve's session because there's a lot to talk about. Two, there's a lot more to talk about because there are other sessions coming on. So I'm going to cut short here with just a last question from you guys to IMO, and then we'll run off our session. And I thought this question deserves attention. And the question is, will IMO impose penalties to those who do not meet target milestones on way to 2050?
Well, this is a good question. Well, IMO will not penalize anybody directly. The system itself, as it has been defined, will penalize those not complying with the requirements. In fact, I mentioned before that we have technical and operational measures. The operational measures are the carbon intensity indicator. This indicator is an operational factor that has to be calculated in a routine way. And ships will have to improve this carbon intensity indicator every year by 2%. And there will be a rating from A to E. The rating will be for the not performing very well in terms of environment, and the rating A will be for the cleanest ships in the world. So I think this is going to penalize already non-compliant ships, because in fact those shippers who want to be cleaner will choose these clean ships to carry their own goods. So I think the system itself is going to penalize the non-compliant ships.
I love that. We ourselves, the system, is going to look after ourselves. I think it's all about trade. We're going to move forward with getting this commitment. There's mission, targets. There's people to catch up in where they need to go forward with. And if we don't get it there, we should punish ourselves as a system. So it's a lot to talk about. I thank all the panel. Please give a round of applause to the panel for the first session in this conference. Thank you so much. And I wish every one of you have a good conversation for the next of the session. Thanks, guys.
We really appreciate it, Mr. Ishak Ismail, for facilitating our panelists as well, for taking time to be here. I would like to invite you down this way. Thank you. Such a great honor to have with us Mr. Ismail Cobos Delgado, Mr. David Fu, Mr. Michael Drake, Mr. Pele Christensen, and Commander Peter Bizarro. And of course, all of you, ladies and gentlemen, contributing to this conversation that we had on stage just minutes ago. Now, as we turn over the stage to refresh again for panel 2, we are going to be talking about maritime safety in the digital age. And of course, after which you'll lead us to the break time. Okay, so hang with us. Stay with us and see if you can participate in this conversation as well through Pigeonhole. And we're talking from the panel focus from green to digital for this discussion. We will also continue be taking your questions on Pigeonhole. Moderating this panel session, I'm pleased to be opening a stage to our moderator, Captain Yves van der Bond, to join us. He's Honorary President of Nautical Institute Singapore branch. Thank you for making time to be here and facilitating this conversation. With him on the panel, I'm pleased to invite Mr. Roberto Cazzulo, Gazzulo. He is the chair-elect of International Association of Classification Societies. Good to have you. Thank you for flying out to be here with us. Pleasure. We have Captain Andre Lagoban, the president of Nautical Institute. Also good to have you out with us here today. We have Mr. Nick Porter to join us on stage. He is chairman of Oil Companies International Marine Forum. Welcome. And we have Mr. Steen Loon. He's the chief executive officer of RightShip to join us on stage for this panel discussion. We'll give our gentlemen a moment as they settle in. Right, just taking a moment to breathe through, and we just allow the panelists and our moderator, Captain Eve, to take a moment. I'll hand the time over to you. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Really good to be back here on stage again. Really good to see a lot of familiar faces. And looking forward to a really interesting discussion, actually, on digital age, maritime safety. There were a number of very interesting comments that the minister made earlier, and I'm hoping that we can have enough time in this panel to address some of those comments, actually. I thought the Maritime 5G was really interesting, how that can help with telemedicine, how it can help with reducing the number of people that are coming on board of ships. I thought that was interesting. I have a number of questions that I prepared, but I'm going to need your help. I would really want to make this a very engaging discussion, so I really would appreciate if all of you can submit your questions into the pigeonhole. I'm trying to juggle with 2 iPads on my lap here, and I'll try and get through those questions and put them to the panel. We also have a poll that we asked you to fill in during the registration. We're going to have a look at that after the initial opening statement. And the initial results of that poll were quite surprising, but I'm going to keep that as a surprise for later. I'm going to ask our first panelist to do an opening statement. Mr. Roberto, please.
Eve, thank you very much. Frankly speaking, whatever I prepared for my opening statement has been anticipated by regulators. Is that correct? And we, as IACS, as classification societies, would like to contribute to the work of regulators, and I'll address my statements on that area. First of all, we believe that we need a definition of digitalization in some respect, because it is a very broad concept, where many digital techniques are applied depending on different contexts where they are used. And for sure, there is a potential of application of this concept. But the question that we might address in this panel is what is or what could be the contribution to safety of digital techniques. And we are asking also ourselves, where are the areas where we could give our best contribution to safety because of the potential impact. One example is about what already has been addressed by the Australian authority, is about optimization of ship operations, reduction of fuel consumptions through digital techniques or through more control options, both on board and ashore. And this might have also an impact on the way the machinery systems are surveyed, and perhaps change a little bit some criteria about the continuous service mechanism, instead imposing overhauling intervals. That might be useless if the system works well, or should be perhaps from risk-based point of view increased when the system doesn't work well. Just to go straight to the point, IACS has many working groups dealing with different angles of the concept of digitalization. You mentioned cybersecurity, and you know that our working group, or in fact a panel, has dealt with the cyber resilience concept. That means how to impose or to standardize some requirements for the builders, for the manufacturers, in order to make data systems more robust to possible cyber attacks. And these are two unified requirements that have recently been adopted and amended already to increase our surveys criteria in that area. I hope that if there are some questions, I could expand that. Another working group is dealing with the complex system, because we are aware that having more and more integration of different systems could lead to some weak points in the overall, having an overall view. And we are developing criteria to identify what could be the means for avoiding such weak points or for giving a good functioning of the whole system. And this is also relating to a work that we would like to contribute to the IMO, is about what could be the future of SOLAS or future-proofing elements of SOLAS that might have an impact on digitalization. And we are contributing to the work on remotely assisted ships or autonomous ships, although frankly speaking, we believe that this work has some steps forward to be dealt with. We're working on survey techniques because our surveyors, especially in the previous years when there were some COVID problems, are not to be left alone when they are on board, and it is better they are assisted either by techniques that can make their service more efficient or by some technical staff ashore that can assist them in their work. And it is exactly the same for the seafarers, I believe, that they could get benefits from being assisted ashore in some areas of decision-making. And the last bit, and I'll close, about safe decarbonization. We defined a panel on safe decarbonization that deals with different issues. And there is, in some areas, a potential for the digitalization being a tool to facilitate the pathway towards decarbonization that is, I believe, a transition process. It's all, and I hope that we will have a discussion on these points.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Very interesting. If I can move on to Captain Andre of Nautical Institute, please, for your opening.
Thank you very much, Yves. Is this active? The remote? Okay. The digital age is with us now. Let's be honest. In many ways, the future is already here. These are two of the ships I've been on recently, and there's no doubt that they are proof of our new digital era at sea. They're being run extremely well, and everyone on board that I met during the operations were well-trained and professional. So we're getting it right. Well, for now. How do we ensure that they continue to be operated in a safe, efficient, and commercially viable way? We must ensure that there's continuity of onboard training. When I've stood by a new build, we attended many courses and demonstrations prior to sailing on the maiden voyage. But that's not feasible for a newer ship already in service. So we must pass on the knowledge to those relieving us and to those coming after us. We do this through a system of onboard training, familiarization, and informal experiential knowledge transfer I like to call mentoring. Let me ask you a question. How many in the room here today have sailed? Many of you. And of those of you that have sailed, how many remember their first ship and can still find their way around it if they were put back on board? Yeah, just about as many. Let me take you back a few years, quite a few in fact. 40 years ago this year, I joined this ship in Panama, my first ship as third officer. A 33-tank product carrier loading 9 grades of cargo in Trinidad, bound for Tahiti. A daunting prospect, especially as the chief officer was also on his first trip in that rank. But I had already sailed for 4 months on a sister vessel as a cadet, so I knew my way around. I'm so grateful to have that knowledge and the confidence to use it. And I don't think I've actually changed that much either. One of the ways we can ensure the long-term successful operation of our future ships is by putting cadets on those we have now. There are so many benefits for such a small financial investment. What does a brand new dual-fuel tanker cost? Let's say approximately $120 million. And what does a cadet cost? Maybe as much as $10,000 per year if we cover their college tuition, travel, and pay them a small wage. $30,000 over 3 years. Now that is just 0.00025% of the total cost of the vessel. Or if you put it in perspective, that ship is 336 meters long, and we are talking 8.4 centimeters of it. How much does an HMPE mooring rope cost? Makes you think, doesn't it? These cadets will be the masters, chief engineers, superintendents, and senior managers within the lifetime of the vessel. I'm delighted to say that since I was last here a year ago, some companies have taken up my challenge I discussed with you of putting 2 cadets on every new ship they build. Some are even putting cadets on their vessels from the ports and countries where they trade, not just their home countries, just as we spoke about. But it's not enough. We have thousands of cadets in many parts of the world that have gained their academic qualifications but are unable to get on a ship and gain their sea time to complete their STCW qualifications. This is a sad situation and one that we at the Nautical Institute are trying to change. I'm very happy to discuss this further with you over the course of the next 2 days of conference. From what I can see as an active seafarer, the new generation of cadets are the best and brightest we have ever seen, and most are already experts in the digital field. Let's give them the opportunity they so richly deserve and train them properly for what I hope will be a safe and bright future. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Andre. Very passionate call for action there. Really important that we take care of our cadets, otherwise nobody will be able to replace us later on. Can I look at you, Nick, now, please? Your opening statement.
Yes, thank you for that. And good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm just going to start with a background to the All Companies International Marine Forum, or OCIMF, or OCIMF, as some know it, and bring you into today very, very briefly. OCIMF was formed over 50 years ago on the back of rising public concern for the safety of tankers. And that was really culminated in the Torrey Canyon incident in 1967. Since then, OCIMF has been working hard through best practice and inspection regimes to improve reducing harm and spills on tankers, gas carriers, barges, upstream vessels, and the integration to terminals and to ports. And I would say today, with the help of its 111 members and shipping companies and stakeholders, that we've seen drastic improvement in our journey to zero harm for people in the environment, which is the vision of OCIMF. But there's still significant challenges for our industry, significant challenges. If we talk spills last year, there was 6 spills greater than 7 tons, of which half of those were greater than 700 tons. And those are across the entire industry. In terms of injury to people, the safety fatality rates in our industry are 20 times worse than ashore and 5 times worse than the construction industry. So we've got a lot to do still on safety and harm to the environment, and that requires us to think differently. And at OCIMF, we're thinking differently in the context of human factors or human element, primarily. That word, we've already heard it a few times today, and it means different things to different people. For us, it's about recognizing that humans make mistakes, that error is normal, and therefore we need to build error-tolerant systems, recognizing that people fail. And so those error-tolerant systems are designed for people to fail, but to fail safely. So we're doing a lot of work around that in everything we think and we do. And that's proved. There was an Alliance Insurance report in 2020, and that said that between 75% and 96% of human incidents contributed to safety incidents in the previous year. And if we link that to the conversation today, that's where technology and digitalization help us so much. Because if we need to build error-tolerant systems, and those systems recognized through the construction, the design, and the operations of the vessels, that we cannot rely on the humans to be the last barrier, then technology and digitalization becomes a significant part of that solution. I see we jumped that slide. That slide is about recognizing that from SIRE, and I'm going to talk about SIRE 2.0 in a second, that we need the human factor to take the next step from where we are today in our journey to a zero incident industry. And just to my final slide, please. So what's OCIMF doing? Can you just change slide? Thanks. So what's OCIMF doing using technology and digitalization? Well, we're now rolling out SIRE 2.0 and its enhanced inspection regime, and we're really leveraging digitalization to have greater understanding. So we're going on board, and it's more than a binary understanding, a yes or a no, when we look at vessels, but we're actually looking at a qualitative and a graded process of understanding it. And that will allow us to do data trawling in the future, and as an industry, learn through leading indicators, whether it's around human, culture, whether it's around systems or equipment, that we can actually take a far more macro look at where those opportunities to improve are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Steen, can I come to you for your opening, please?
Yes, thank you, Yves, and thank you to MPA for having me here today. I feel a little bit like a fish out of water, sitting here with 4 other white middle-aged men. Those of you who know me in the room know that this is not a joke. This is just me speaking from my heart. I gave MPA a hard time to ensure that this panel was to be gender diverse, and it was right up until yesterday. Caroline Young from SSA was supposed to have joined us, and I hope you'll all join me in wishing her well. She's down with COVID, but she tells us this morning she's feeling well. And why do I start with that? I do that because I genuinely, as I'm certain the rest of our panel does as well, see strong links between gender diversity and safety. And the link is very obvious from some of the good work that we gathered last week in Athens in the Global Maritime Forum. Engdi, who is up here on table 1, was there as well, and many other representatives from the Singapore and of course the global maritime community. And part of that work that the Global Maritime Forum released, and some of you may have read about it in the press, included 11 specific vessels and good shipping companies, ship owners behind those 11 vessels that made a strong commitment to minimum have 4 female seafarers for the next year on board those vessels to learn from those experiences. And why is that then? Well, essentially, good data shows us, and I'm here among others to talk about data and safety today, of course. Good data shows us that the female gender represents a lower risk tolerance than male. So that goes quite well with obviously having a mixed environment, not just on board the vessels, but regardless what each of us do in the industry, we consume also in our land-based offices the ex-seafarer. And today we essentially fish in a pond of about 98.5% men. So we are not gender diverse in whatever we do in the industry, and we need to become that. So hopefully Caroline or other representatives will join us next time around when we have the discussion to be on stage. If I could ask for my slide to start populating with data. I can be in control myself. That's wonderful. There we go. Then I thought I would speak in terms of real hard data-driven evidence to give a couple of examples of what perhaps we'll be discussing this afternoon. So if we look at dry bulk vessels, general cargo vessels, and all types of tankers, including gas carriers, then over the last 12 months, we saw 101 fatalities there. So in short, there's a lot to work on. 0 would be an acceptable number. When we in RightShip go on board vessels to inspect them, then it is not a surprise when we show up. It's a booked job, and obviously the ship management company, the ship owner, and the crew on board are well aware we show up. Nonetheless, over the last 12 months, we came across in 16% of the times when we would go on board to do an inspection that the pilot ladder was non-compliant. So obviously, knowing that we come on board to do an inspection job of 2 days, most vessels would have had time to prepare and ensure that the pilot ladder, as a minimum, would be compliant. Yet, this happens in that many times. We lost a pilot here in Singapore last year, and the industry, from the data that's available to us globally, lost 7 pilots. Again, entirely preventable and unacceptable. We registered a total of 2,239 incidents that we categorize and make available on the transparent RightShip platform over the last 12 months. And that's a good thing in many ways, in as much as that allows us sharing not just of the data, but of all the details of each of those incidents, most of which are, of course, learning incidents, but 101 fatalities were part of those incidents. We also register and make sure that the industry is fully aware which companies and individuals are behind the abandonment of seafarers. In 2022, we saw 117 cases of seafarers being abandoned, so 117 vessels where that happened. A world record, if one could put it in that way. And the last 3 years we've registered, it's become worse and worse and worse. This affected, in 2022, 1,843 seafarers on those vessels. Each of them has a father or the mother or a spouse or children waiting for them at home. And each of them are in an environment where economically, let alone emotionally, lots of people depend on them. Preventable, unacceptable, and hence we spend a lot of time in our organization making that very transparent to anyone who transacts through the supply chain. And part of maybe rounding some of those data points up, part of the how is the crew welfare self-assessment, which more than 300 well-intentioned and well-run ship management companies have assessed themselves against and provided data to validate that assessment. That touches 8,311 vessels. And if we assume on average 25 people on board and 25 people to match them at home, that's about 400,000 seafarers that benefit from that exercise. Now it should be about 4 times that, so we can hit all seafarers, and with you here in the room and my plea to you, hopefully you'll contribute to that number going up if you run a ship management company. We are very intent on continuing to grow the awareness that lies within this code of conduct that is there to help ship management companies understand how good intermediary and great looks when it comes to caring for the seafarers. So that was just some of the data points that I thought I would share, and look forward to the discussion on the panel.
Thank you very much, Steen. And these are some really sobering statistics. It's really sad that in this day and age, and this is only on the dry side, this is only on a sector of the whole shipping fleet, that we are having 101 fatalities. That's really sad. Thank you all for your opening slide. Could I get a slide up with the results of the poll? Yes. So this was an interesting question we put to you during the registration. What are the immediate concerns? And actually it's very similar to the first panel's question, but this is in general, what are the immediate concerns from maritime safety that should be addressed and that you think? And I have to be honest here, I'm a bit surprised, certainly given the number of statistics that we just saw in the previous slide, that there is 10% of you who think that we need to look at casualties. I thought that was an interesting result out of this. 50% on seafarer training, I think that is really good. But I'm gonna pass it on to my panel here, and I really would like to know the thoughts of all of you. What do you think on these results? Roberto, shall I start with you?
Thank you. I will start with the colored one about sharing of data and in maritime safety. Many years ago, I was at the IMO chairing the MSC working group on human element and formal safety assessment. And we developed very important documents based, for instance, on US Coast Guard human interface issues. That was a very good document presented 20 years ago, let me say. And formal safety assessment guidelines. At those times, we believed that the exchange of data was not sufficient and that there should be some mechanism for improving data exchange. Now, I believe we have an opportunity through digitalization and through more data or big data gathered from novel ships to focus more in that area and perhaps establishing more cooperative efforts towards data analysis from risk assessment point of view. And I believe now, 20 years after when I was discussing this point, we are in a much better position than in the past to discuss these issues in an open and friendly manner.
Thank you. Captain Andre, you will have a different opinion than me on this one.
Thank you very much, Captain Eves. And yes, this actually comes as no surprise to me at all. As a serving seafarer, I just came off my last ship 10 days ago, and I've got about 10 days left to leave before I go back to my next one. First off, I think we must say, just looking at this, the continuous high number of seafarer casualties and industries, that doesn't mean that we don't care anymore. It really doesn't. That is still there, and we are incredibly concerned with casualties and injuries on board vessels. But we have also other things to be concerned about now, and particularly the training for new technologies and new fuels. Because as I said in my slide, the future is here. We have these in the industry. It's not unusual for me to see now a vessel or to maneuver a vessel with great big tanks on the deck. It's here now, and we just don't seem to have yet the full training in place for this, and that is what is so incredibly important to us, that we see that. The sharing of anonymized data between various maritime industries scores quite high as well, and that again doesn't surprise me, because we have problems sharing data from ships. We've seen particularly through the COVID era at sea and continuing on now, the digitalization of shipping is taking place, and it's taking place at a rapid speed. but we're not actually increasing bandwidth on board many of our vessels. We're still working with the same internet on board, and we cannot communicate at all times. I'm regularly on a ship, and I say, the internet's not working, Captain. He says, well, I'm sorry, pilot, we're heading in the wrong direction. As soon as we turn in another direction, it'll start again. I know that the satellite system is coming in. I've actually been on a vessel very recently, the very first one that was trialing Starlink, and it was absolutely awesome. But it's not the norm, not yet. And we haven't caught up on board our vessels. You know, there are still ships where everybody on board is still paying to access the internet. Can you believe, in this day and age, and with the changes to MLC that we've got, everybody from the master down is being charged for the use of internet, you know, and that actually reflects into the last one then, seafarer well-being and retention. There's so many in the room today, don't remember the world without internet. Can you imagine a young 20-year-old being put on a vessel, straight out of college, just done 3 years in college, put on a vessel, multicultural, multilingual, multinational vessel, and oh, by the way, if you want to access the internet, you've got to pay for it. We wonder why retention isn't there. No. Thanks, Eve.
Thank you, Captain Andre. Nick, your thoughts?
Thanks, Eve. So just starting at the yellow bit, as you can imagine, I would do. So a fundamental priority for industry is around safety and around having everyone go home safe to their family. You heard me talk about it earlier. It's not just important to our people, it's good business sense. There's proven links between good quality, safety performance, productivity, and good business. So there's many levels that we need to drive those improvements through to a zero incident industry. Well-being and retention, a lot of people have heard me talk a lot about this area as well. Well-being, demonstrating care to our people and feeling valued as a seafarer and recognized by the company that you work for is so important in terms of their commitment. And it leads as well. Good well-being and support of mental welfare leads directly through to safety on board. So it's a strong linkage there. Retention is a critical issue for our industry right now. Many of you may have seen the Drury report a couple of months ago, where they already believe that we've got a 9% shortfall in our officers globally. And COVID, the pandemic, has done ourselves no favors in terms of the attraction and retention in our industry. Common data. It's amazing to believe that we as an industry still don't have a single consistent way where we bring safety data together. And we've tried a number of times, and we will continue. Certainly on the Ockham side, we will continue to look and solve this issue, because until we know the whole, full, consistent picture of safety reporting, how can we be a learning industry, and how can we improve if we don't have that transparency and consistency in data? Technology and having the seafarers ready. Well, I'm co-chairing a tripartite advisory panel with the industry, with MPA, and with the unions here in Singapore. And we're in the depths of looking at this issue, and in the next few months, we can hopefully share more around this area.
Thank you, Nick. Steen?
Yes, as I was sitting listening to my fellow panelists answer, I sort of aggregated this feeling that probably all of us would like to see 100% in each of the four categories. Now, that's not possible, but I think we validated that they are all individually important, and what I also heard was they're all interlinked, which is quite obvious. So a couple of odd comments, I guess, from my side. So first of all, what can be truly exciting excuse me, is the ability to go beyond the data that resides in each of our companies. So again, I'm speaking to the orange part here. My impression is organizations that does really well are organizations that are understanding how to share data, and the data sharing is a strength, not necessarily putting your company at risk. And I see the data sharing as being a precursor to working on issues like seafarer retention. If you know more than what you just know in your own company, that you might be, as a ship management company, running 100 vessels, and you are no doubt world-class in those 100 vessels. But that doesn't mean that you know everything there is to know about doing ship management. So if you put yourself in, as an example here, a position of data sharing, what you have on your 100 vessels, you can enrich other ship management companies that can then aggregate that data. And that goes across whatever role we play in the industry. What stood out to me and what stands out to me in many of the conversations we have across the maritime industry is the importance, or the perceived importance, of the future fuels. And I'm guilty at sometimes being a bit annoyed at how many resources we are all allocating towards the discussion of the future fuel, totally understanding how incredibly significant that journey is. There is no greater journey. And I wanted to put it in perspective of safety when I saw that this is where a majority of the respondents have gone. There is nothing that creates a less safe environment than the fuels we use today. It's not the operation on board the vessels, but it's the emissions that come out of the fuels I'm talking about. So there was a Harvard report out that's made a correlation between deaths on the entire planet and then emissions. And the number was 8.7 million people that are found to prematurely die compared to their average age as a result of emissions. If we then accept our responsibility in the maritime industry, that we constitute 3% of the global emissions, that makes us responsible in an inferred way for the death of 261,000 people. That's probably going to get more of a headline tomorrow if there were members of the press in the room today than if we focus on the 101 fatalities that I opened up with. So it's worth to just consider that safety has many lives and many angles to consider, and we all need to insert ourselves where we can make the biggest difference, obviously.
Steen, thank you so much. Let me know in advance if you are going to escalate those statistics even more. You're really good with data, and this is really scary, everything that you are telling us. I want to come back, though, to both you, Nick, and Steen. And we know, and Nick, you mentioned it in your opening part as well, we know the great work that both Okim and RightShip have done in vetting all the ships that are chartered by their members. We know that the quality of those ships is on a bigger or on a higher standard compared with the rest of the market out there. And I was traveling last week for the club, and I was visiting a couple of our ship owners. I was going through their operations, through their procedures. 3 of them happened to be handy-size Panamax bulk operators. And it was quite interesting to see the difference in standards between the 3 of them. Of course, all of them, they comply with the minimum requirements. That's never the issue. Some of them are a bit closer to the minimum than others. One of the 3 really stood out for having a great system in place. They had all the well-being that you could ask of. They were thinking about their crew, etc. And after, I think, about half an hour or so into the discussion, I found out, oh yes, they are doing RightShip inspections. And it really undermined, not undermined, it underlined my thinking on how both Okim and RightShip, through their system, through people that are participating in it are improving the standards. Now, I know that this is a voluntary system. Not everybody is obliged to go through it, and there are a lot of owners who are choosing not to trade with any of the members from OKIM or RightShip. That's perfectly fine. They can be profitable and trade. But those are the people, I would assume, we need to try and reach out to. Those are the people that are not going to be in the audience here today. Those are the people, and that is going to be my question to you. How can we try and reach out to those people that are not into this system? How can we, is there a way that we can't force them because it's not mandatory and they are complying with IMO. So what can we do to try and reach out to them? Nick.
Thank you, Yves. And Steen visibly distanced himself from me in that question, so I'm not sure what to read into that. On the OKIM side, yes, we have a number of programs, SIRE for tankers, BIRE for barges, OVIC for offshore vessels, and then we have management review systems, TMSA, OVMSA. But as you say, they're all voluntary, and they're premised on an assumption that you want to work with those 111 oil and gas energy companies, and there are many other companies in the world. I mean, there are benefits of doing it, of course. That's the carrot, that you will become more self-aware, and if you're driven to improve, then these are tools, the same with RightShip, these are tools that can absolutely improve and make you more business competitive and improve safety, of course. But you can't take a horse you can take a horse to water, you can't make it drink, of course, and that's where perhaps some of the stick comes into play. We certainly provide our data to flag states, to ports, so that they have access and understand the quality of vessels that have at least had SIRE inspections, for example, that are visiting port. We have IMO advisor status, so we provide input on our knowledge and awareness of the broader industry. But it's something that we need to keep continuing to challenge at an IMO level, at a class level, and as a flag level, and ourselves as a core part of the industry. But this is a tough one.
I just moved over so that I could see all four of you. You know that I'm in love with OKIM, so and a lot of good is obviously being done across the industry to also between an OKIM and a RightShip and many others to share views, opinions, and data. What can we do? I think advocacy, that one of the reasons I very positively showed up for today and for this discussion was, I think advocacy is half the battle. We need to speak with each other, and if there are some industry participants who believe they don't need any help and they're good to go on their own, then I'm keen to listen to that and understand how they do what they do without needing any friends to carry them forward. So being on stage here is again our expression to invite for dialogue and conversation. What have we done as RightShip? Well, 3 years ago, we're a 23-year-old young organization. 3 years ago, we didn't have commercial people, so we didn't sell what we do. And we've changed that, so we've established regions around the world with key account managers and business development managers who are out every day speaking particularly to companies that we believe could benefit from having dialogue. Over the last 24 months, we've converted that into more than doubling the number of ship management companies and ship owners who then subscribe to the platform. So that's a good validation that dialogue works. Where I think the industry can do a lot more is actually cargo owners, because we haven't seen as significant an uptake in charterers, cargo owners coming onto the platform. So growth, but not as impressive as with owners and managers. And that's interesting when you think of it, because if a charterer who is a cargo owner who needs to charter a vessel doesn't believe that they need any insights into the vessel others than what they can get from IMO and class and flag, and they're good to go with those data points that these institutions give them, then it's odd that there is a very significant constituents that subscribe to the methodologies of an OCIMF and also of a RightShip, who truly believe that this is core to their business. And some of you are representatives of that industry here in the room. The cargo can be transported on vessels that are owned by the same ship owner, managed by the same ship management company, operating potentially in a similar physical theater, and be vetted for one cargo owner one day and not for another one another day. I think that's worthy of conversation. Maybe just to close it off, if I look at some of the data that we sit on, then RightShip vets vessels 40,000 times a year. And out of that vetting data, if we take 6 months before a vessel has been vetted and 6 months after, and we just isolate that after period, then a vessel that has been vetted in the subsequent 6 months is 4.5 times as likely to not have a detention than a vessel that has not been vetted. Detention takes on average 4.5 days out of the ship's operating life. It's a pretty negative event, a pretty costly event. So that would suggest that there is significant enterprise value in vetting your vessel before, as a cargo owner, you take it into charter.
Thank you very much. Roberto?
If I may add one point as class. As class, we are, let's say, scrutinized by post-stay control for our work. When a matter is considered class-related detention, it means that the survey carried out either on the scope of class or statutory matters was close to the identification of the detainable issues. And so this matter over the years have become really a more and more important element for defining the class society performance. But we are looking also for other elements that would identify areas for improvement of classification society performance. Frankly speaking, I believe that one area where it is delicate, it is about our role when we audit on behalf of the flag state the ISM code or the safety management system. Many times have an impact on the result that is identified by post-stay control. And this mechanism is somehow different to be proved that is far from our work when we audit the system. And perhaps that's an area where we need to consider possible way of improving the ISM or improving the criteria in which these systems are audited, and extend that to any operator that works under the ISM code. That means basically the whole ocean-going ships.
Thank you very much. I want to take one of your questions that has come in. There are a couple that I saw that are cybersecurity related. I am kindly going to ignore those because there will be a cyber panel coming up. So forgive me for not answering those. But Kunal, you came up with an interesting question. How the panel proposes maritime safety to advance as new technology and developments evolve. And I'm going to bring this back to what was discussed earlier on as well, because Steen was saying about the number of pilot ladder issues every time that were found when his surveyors are going on board. And that is when you know that you are going to get an inspection and you still can't get your pilot ladder in order. And we've had several discussions here in Singapore about pilot ladders and following the unfortunate incident with the pilot earlier this year. And I think I was trying to find back since when pilot ladders exist. Yesterday, Google unfortunately did not help me. I managed to get back as far as somewhere in 58 that I could find regulation, but I think before that it was never digitalized, so I'm not sure how far back it goes. If anybody does know it, please let me know. I'm quite interested. But we are still using the same pilot ladder. It's still the same system. Why is that? And I'm going to look at you, Roberto, in conjunction with this question from Kunal. Is anything being done about pilot ladders?
About pilot ladders, if I'm not wrong, some organizations and associations, I believe also that are in this room, presented the papers to the IMO for having a discussion on pilot ladders. And frankly speaking, I don't know what is the outcome of that discussion right now. Internally in IACS, when we identified that this issue, there were discussion and identification of some issues were relating to the hardware, and others were relating to the maintenance of a pilot ladder and the way the pilot ladder is presented to the pilot when the pilot goes on board, let's say, and as secured. So it is an area where probably we need further discussion, but it's just for me an example of the fact that digitalization is a choice. So we will not have all vessels around the world being fully digitalized in a second, and we will have to live with both traditional conventional ships as well as highly digitalized ships in the same context, in the same environment. So it is good to comment and to say, don't forget safety on conventional vessel, as well as we have to consider a comment what will happen for the most innovative vessels. And for instance, the matter of entry into an enclosed space, that is certainly an issue relating to conventional vessels, becomes even more important when we think about innovative or alternative fuels. And in that area, perhaps digitalization could be helpful, for instance, in identifying potentially critical conditions well before people enter into that space, or in other aspects, the machinery space may become a space where it can be considered an enclosed space. So I would say, and we had some discussion with some panelists before, that our work as IACS could be to contribute in defining systems that are sufficiently robust to avoid a single failure that might impact on the safety issues. And that's the reason why we have established a safe decarbonization panel to consider what are the safety issues behind decarbonization that would allow that the system are sufficiently robust for avoiding that a single failure put people at harm.
Thank you. It's interesting you brought up enclosed space entry. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, we had one ship that entered port with a cargo of coal, which is, I think to most people at least, quite obviously dangerous to go inside a cargo hold. And while the crew was opening up the various cargo holds, one of the stevedores was getting impatient and went into one of the holds before the cargo hold was properly opened. These are stevedores that are, well, sorry to say, but he didn't come out. And these are people that are continuously working with these cargoes that should be clearly aware of the dangers involved with it, but it still happens way too frequently. So I'm going to pass the mic further down the panel if anybody wants to provide a comment on this.
I think you've given a classic example of my human factors piece, where we say humans make mistake and error is normal, and there's so many cases, be it enclosed entry is a classic example where you see the same thing time and time again. And increasing procedures and increasing experience isn't going to solve it. So that's where we take a step back and we look at this error-tolerant system and rethink the situation. And that's why technology and digitalization is so important. We haven't necessarily learned like the aviation industry. Well, we haven't learned like the aviation industry around human-centered design and the human factors that they suffered catastrophic fatalities in the 70s and built systems, whether it was about buddy systems for for checklists, whether it was around the technology that avoided unintentional disastrous consequences that would override controls. We're still, as a industry, not making sufficient connects there. We have ships that are delivered and then handed over, and we solve problems at an operational level, and we seek to learn at an operational level. We haven't got this continuous improvement loop going back into the design of ships yet. And that's a huge opportunity for us to do that. And so as we make ships more complicated, we introduce more risks. So again, we must go back and look at things at a system level. Otherwise, the poor seafarer is the guy that has to deal with this ever-increasing expectations. And we just said humans make mistakes, and they can't be the last barrier. So we've got to take a different approach to this.
Nick, I really agree with your last comment there. As we talk about, excuse me, as we talk about implementing safety procedures, directives, implementing different protocols on board a vessel, it's very much a one-way route of information. We haven't closed the loop, because we're not implementing all these procedures, all these safety procedures, all these good procedures on board the vessel, and then asking for a feedback. Is that working? Is that working on board your vessel? Can you implement this? Are you able to do that? I mean, ballast water exchange and ballast water management procedures, to me as a seafarer, are a very good example. The ships are required to comply, but is anyone talking to the chief officers about how they're doing? Now we've had them for a little while. How are you actually managing to implement them on board? Work rest hours, another fine example. A great directive implemented on the vessels. But are we actually asking the masters? Are we asking the chief engineers? Are you, your officers and crew, actually able to comply? We know you're putting down the right things on your forms, but in practicality, are you able to do this? And I think that's incredibly important these days as we move towards the upcoming directions of 2040 and 2050, is that we start involving the ships and the seafarers on board, because they are your professionals. They are the people that are actually going to implement this. And at the end of the day, they are the ones that are going to save the environment by reducing our emissions. You're going to give us these systems, but we're going to implement them on board, and we're going to somehow make them work. So we must do this. And it's incredibly important in ISM systems and SMS systems that we do this as well. We send out directives to the ship because legally, that's the best thing we have to do. Can I just take a couple of minutes just to give you one really quick example of this? It's one of my pet hates, but on many, many ships that I go on, the chief officer is on the forecastle for stations and for anchoring. It's a requirement of the SMS systems, and I'm sure on many of your ships, to our ship managers in the room today, you have implemented this because you want the senior officer up there where all the action is. But nobody steps back and thinks that in 5 years, 4 years' time, that chief officer is going to be master, and he's actually going to be anchoring the ship. He needs to be on the bridge. After he's settled into his rank, maybe 4 years of training, he needs to be up there understudying the master and learning how to control the ship. And that needs to be put into the ISM and allowed for. It doesn't mean, yes, if the ship has an accident, we're going to have to justify why the chief officer was on the bow. But I believe we can do, because the second officer, third officer are quite capable of letting the anchor go and picking it up. Let's be honest, those of us who were at sea, we all did it. So we need to listen to the seafarer and what is actually practical on board, and write that into our systems and the directives for them. Thank you.
Is there time? Great. I wanted to pick up on the entry into enclosed space and make the link to Kunal's question there on new technology. So over the last 3 years, we as an industry, we lost 39 seafarers as a result of them going into enclosed spaces. Many of them went in as either number 2 or number 3. So that's the emotional connection to the brothers on board the vessel. I need to take action. Emotionally, totally understandable, but irrational to put yourself in a position of risk. The question really here is, how can we use technology, aside from good training, obviously, how can we use technology to de-risk that a person goes into an enclosed space in the first place? So first of all, there's lots of physical barriers that should be better on many vessels than they are, and maybe that was one of the 3 vessels you saw in China last week, Eve. But think about a simple thing like a wearable. Many of us use them in our everyday lives. These are entirely possible today to implement on vessels, yet they're not being used, let's face it. You could easily set up a physical safety zone where the seafarer who is wearing the wearable will be alerted before going into an unsafe zone, and the bridge or the officer on watch could have a remote a readout of that to know exactly where his people were and take faster action than waiting until one of them is essentially asphyxiated as a result of entering a cargo space. So there's a lot that's available to us today that we can do something about. And I think we need to allow ourselves to dream crazy as well. In a year, maximum 2, we've got molten salt reactors as part of our energy provision. It wasn't very long ago that none of us knew anything about that space, and it's still a bit foreign and exciting. But it's tomorrow, right? It's coming at us very fast. So coming back maybe to the pilot ladders, we have got to go into a space where it's not the people that have approved the current pilot ladders or the people who have learned and trained how to use them that we rely on to find the next technology leap. And this will be, in my view, a potential technology leap that we should think of. And this is probably the crazy part of my brain functioning now, but I kind of enjoy that. Whether you do is up to you. If we can deliver already today medicine and smaller parcels onto a vessel via a drone, could we not imagine an environment where people can get onto vessels in a different way than via a rope ladder? I'd like to think that there is technology that can help us get there, and that we will know how to sufficiently safety train ourselves and safety validate that innovation when it comes our way. So let's try that as well. I entirely agree. The rope is kind of, or the ladder is kind of yesteryears.
Or just to build on to that, Steen, and this goes back to what the minister was announcing on the electronic bills, the EBDNs. If there are different ways in which the digital technology or the new way can help us to reduce the necessity of even having to go on board ships, that would be helpful as well. Roberto, you wanted to do a brief comment.
Very briefly to echo what Nick said about complex system. In Ajax, we are working on the definition of a complex system, having multiple sensors, a lot of automation, controlling software, and try to identify what could be done at design and testing stage in order to make this system sufficiently robust. Let's say robust in order that it is not to be particularly managed by the crew, but it could be robust intrinsically. And let's imagine that ships have a digital twin model where we can simulate with what-if scenarios what might go wrong even before having the ship built. And it is not a dream. For instance, in the cruise sector, there are yards, shipyards, shipbuilders that are defining a digital twin model. So let's move forward and having some dreams becoming a reality.
Thank you. I saw a number of related questions coming in. I hope those were answered as well with this discussion. I want to put forward one question on the well-being side, because we were talking about internet availability on board, and we are aware that seafarers don't want to go on board of ships anymore if there is no internet, but there's a flip side to this, and this person put a question up on how this internet connectivity and social media availability on board, how is it affecting the work-rest hours of the crew on board? Is there anybody, Captain Andre, is that something from your practical seafaring experience? How do you feel about being able to regulate your work and rest on board with internet?
It is a concern, but it is a management, excuse me. And I don't think it's, let's face it, the merchant marine is evolving. It's evolved from day one when we first went to sea, and it's continued to evolve. And we deal with the internet now. Yes, if there is good internet connection, that is a certain amount of it. But I think what we're talking about here is seafarers who are responsible, professional people. We're highly restricted. We're restricted in our work rest hours. We're restricted to zero consumption of alcohol on board. These days, we're restricted in many ways. We're restricted on board the ships, not even allowed to go ashore, still in many, many ports. So we have to have some sort of release, and to us, a lot of the release is being able to, for me as a seafarer, is being able to talk to my wife once a day. I thoroughly enjoy that. We have a chat every day. That's part of my routine. And we have to allow for that. I like to read books. We have to allow for that. We have to have a relaxation period, and that includes the internet these days. You can imagine a young father or mother at sea today, seeing her kids every day. She can actually engage with them through the internet. It's so terribly important. And I don't hold that it is doing harm on board. I really don't, not like anything else we've had in the past. It is not doing harm on board. It's something that has to be managed. And I saw a great example of this in India a couple of days ago, where they were talking about a system that they had on board set up in a common room, that the crews could download series, they could download films, they could download all sorts of media onto the system in the mess room. It got updated every couple of weeks. The system got updated to bring the latest movies, series, the likes on board, but it was only available in that mess room. It wasn't available in the cabin, so anyone who wanted to watch their series when they came up, watch whatever, went into the mess room and did that, and I thought that was brilliant.
Thank you very much. Was anybody else wanted to comment on this? All good? We are running out of time. Well, actually, we are perfectly on time. Thank you very much, everyone, for submitting your questions. Thank you very much to all my panelists for a very engaging discussion. And if you want to ask anything further, please do approach us over coffee. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our panelists, Mr. Sten Lund, Mr. Nick Porter, Captain Andre Legoban, Mr. Roberto Cazzullo, as well as Captain Eve for facilitating that conversation. Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. A round of applause for our panelists, many of whom have flown in specially to be here and to share their experiences with all of us. And of course, to you audiences as well for staying through the entire hour to participate actively. And I believe that I saw many noddies along the way because many of the points brought up actually resonated with us about everything coming together, being human-centric and putting the person in the center, the well-being of all our seafarers out at sea. That's also part of the emotional and mental safety. That said, we are going to be going for a break, which I think is much needed and appreciated at this point. There's a couple of things I'd like to say. We're going to be turning around the room for session 2. So for those of you who have registered, you would have the email with the QR code. You will need to scan again when you re-enter as part of our registration process. That's it. So you want to carry your bags along with you during this break as well. I'd just like to take about 2 minutes of your time to just scan the QR code, because while it's fresh in your mind, we would love and appreciate your feedback, what you enjoyed, what you'd like to see next year. And after you're done with the feedback, I encourage you to do the quiz as well, because we're going to be picking a couple of winners from this 2 days to win an Amazon gift voucher worth $50. Got a couple of winners. So as long as you got the answers correct, I think it's pretty easy. That's what I heard. Yeah, so please put it in. It only takes a couple of minutes to put in your answers, and all the best to all of you. Give you a couple of minutes of silence as we do this. Coming back into the room will be about 3:55. A bell will ring, and you'll know to come back in to enjoy the next session, session 2, at about 4 o'clock. All right, I'll leave you to work out the feedback form and the quiz. In the meantime, have a very good and well-deserved break. We'll see you back here 4 p.m. in this room for session 2. It was great having you for session 1. Enjoy your break.